The fog hung thick over the city like a shroud, cloaking the streets in a silvery veil that blurred streetlights into halos. The usual honking and chatter of New York was muted beneath the mist, muffled as if the city itself was holding its breath. John's cab crept along the slick asphalt, tires whispering against the wet pavement. He flipped on the low beams. Anything brighter would have only scattered the fog into ghostly prisms. John had been driving for nearly 20 years, but nights like this never got easier. The city at night was a different beast, colder, lonelier. His hands tightened around the steering wheel as he turned onto 47th Street, headlights dim and fading into the dense mist. He pulled over near a small bodega, the neon sign flickering in the haze. The promise of a hot coffee was enough to break the tension coiling in his shoulders. He popped the trunk, the metal latch whining softly in the quiet. Reaching in for his jacket, his fingers brushed something cold and oddly heavy. The unexpected weight jolted him upright. His heart caught as his eyes adjusted to the dim light inside the trunk. Amanda, her pale face was twisted in a grimace, eyes wide open as if pleading for help from some unseen nightmare. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, the fabric stained faintly in place. She looked so fragile, so out of place in the cramped metal box. John stumbled backward, a cold sweat breaking out across his brow. Keys clattered to the pavement. The bile rising in his throat tasted bitter. He swallowed hard, barely able to breathe. This couldn't be real. Sirens wailed in the distance before long, cutting through the fog's heavy silence. Detective Wilson arrived swiftly, ducking beneath the police tape with practiced ease. He took in the scene. The trembling cab driver, the still figure in the trunk, the creeping fog curling like smoke around street lamps. Wilson was a man worn thin by years on the force. His broad shoulders stooped just slightly beneath the weight of unsolved cases and lost souls. His trench coat was threadbare at the cuffs, and his eyes carried the dull glint of someone who had stared into darkness too often. Amanda's dead gaze, however, stirred something raw and personal deep within him. He thought of his sister Elena, vanished decades ago, swallowed by the city's shadows without a trace. "You found her like this?" Wilson asked softly, crouching beside the cab. John nodded, voice shaky. "I swear, Detective, I didn't even open the trunk today. I don't know how she got there." Wilson stood, pacing slowly around the cab, eyes sharp and searching. "Someone put her there while you weren't looking. That means you picked up the wrong fare. Or someone slipped in without your knowledge." John's mind raced back through the day. Faces, addresses, conversations blurred together like smoke. He finally settled on one memory. A man in a gray hoodie, near Central Park, said he needed to get to Queens. Quiet guy, didn't say much, left quick. Wilson nodded. "We'll pull footage from the traffic cams, but this guy didn't just dump the body. He used your cab like a weapon." A sudden gust swept the fog aside for a moment, revealing a shadowy figure across the street. Wilson's gaze snapped there, but the figure was gone when he blinked. The next morning's forensic report offered little relief. Amanda had been dead for hours before John discovered her. No struggle inside the trunk, no blood, just the cold stillness and a faint trace of cheap cologne. Wilson's investigation led him through the city's veins, questioning John's prior passengers, checking security cameras at the bodega and nearby streets. Finally, a grainy image surfaced. The man in the gray hoodie, carrying a heavy duffel bag. "He transferred the body while riding with you," Wilson muttered grimly. "Calculated, professional." A spot behind a shuttered building on 56th revealed fresh tire tracks. John had briefly stopped there when the man took a phone call long enough for the deadly handoff. Tracing Amanda's last movements brought Wilson to a jazz bar in Midtown. Amanda's purse remained on the table, untouched. Witnesses spoke of a man trailing her, wearing that same cheap cologne. The killer was meticulous, leaving a signature behind in scent and shadows. 3 nights later, Wilson sat alone in his cramped office, thumbing through old case files. He paused at a faded folder labeled Wilson Elena Missing. Inside was a silver necklace, one that had been recovered from a storm drain years ago. The faint aroma of cheap cologne drummed from the paper, catching him off guard. He turned the delicate chain in his fingers, discovering an engraving recently added. "I never forgot. J." His breath hitched. Meanwhile, John adjusted the rearview mirror in his cab, a small smile touching his lips. In the back seat, a closed duffel bag waited patiently. The radio crackled, and a slow, soulful saxophone filled the air. Fog wrapped around the city once more as John pulled away, vanishing into the night. Unable to rest, Wilson returned to the alley on 56th just before dawn. His fingers traced the worn bricks where the tire tracks ended, searching for a clue beyond the obvious. His hand caught a subtle groove, a false panel cleverly concealed within the wall. With effort, he pried the bricks loose and squeezed into the narrow crawl space behind. Inside, a single bare bulb flickered weakly, casting light on a hidden room plastered with old jazz posters and yellowed sheet music. Photos of missing women covered the walls, faces frozen in time. At the center hung a framed picture of a teenage girl, Elena Wilson. On a dusty desk lay an old cassette player. Wilson pressed play. A smoky voice filled the room, a haunting jazz melody overlaid with piano keys. The voice was familiar. "John, for you, Elena, always." Wilson stood rooted, the bulb swinging overhead. Outside, the fog lifted, but inside, the darkness whispered secrets only the night could hear. The cassette player clicked off, leaving Wilson in near silence except for the faint hum of the city waking beyond the hidden room. His fingers lingered on the edge of the desk, eyes fixed on the photo of Elena. He swallowed a lump of grief and resolve. Who had built this shrine? John. But why? And how did it connect Amanda and the other missing women? Wilson's phone buzzed, breaking the spell. A text from his partner. "New lead on the hoodie guy. CCTV at Queens bus terminal. He's been spotted." Adrenaline surged. Wilson pocketed the necklace carefully and slipped out, sealing the crawl space behind him. Back in the cab, John drove with purpose, the city lights flickering through the fog like ghosts. His hands gripped the wheel tighter, mind replaying every detail, every lost note of his life's unfinished symphony. He thought of his mother's worn piano, the long nights spent trying to find solace in music. And then Amanda. Her death not just a tragedy, but a chord in a song that John was still composing. A desperate act born from grief and guilt. But the man in the gray hoodie wasn't just a random passenger. John had allowed this dance to begin, the trap to close. Wilson's chase led him to the Queens bus terminal, a grim hive of movement and desperation. The CCTV footage showed a tall figure in a gray hoodie slipping into a crowded terminal, clutching a duffel bag, empty now. Wilson's gut tightened. The man was fast, careful, methodical, a ghost in the fog. Wilson approached the terminal manager, flashing his badge. "I need every camera angle, every exit." Meanwhile, John pulled into a rundown apartment building, the saxophone fading into a soft hum. The door opened with a creak, revealing a sparse room filled with jazz records, candles, and the soft glow of a tabletop radio. He set the duffel bag down gently, revealing carefully wrapped bundles inside. More photos, cassette tapes, a notebook filled with lyrics and names. John knelt, tracing a line beneath Amanda's name. His whisper was barely audible. "I'm sorry, Amanda. I'm so sorry." Wilson's relentless pursuit paid off when he spotted the hoodie man slipping into a subway car just before it pulled away. He chased through the maze of underground tunnels, fog replaced by harsh fluorescent light and echoes. The man darted into an abandoned maintenance corridor. Wilson drew his weapon, calling out, "No sudden moves." But the man vanished into the shadows. Hours later, Wilson sat in his car, exhausted. The pieces were slowly coming together. The victims, the hidden room, the haunting music. John wasn't just a driver. He was a man haunted by loss, trying to atone in a way only he could understand. A vigilante, a ghost, a killer. Wilson's voice was steady but tired when he called into dispatch. "I need a warrant for that apartment and a search on John's cab." The night settled once again over the city, thick with fog and secrets. Somewhere out there, John played his final tune, and Wilson hunted a ghost in the mist. 2 nights after discovering the hidden room, Wilson waited in silence outside John's modest apartment in Brooklyn. The building was unassuming, nestled between a shuttered dry cleaner and a deli that never seemed to close. Wilson had no warrant yet, only a hunch, but he knew John was home. The cab sat outside, its windshield fogged from the inside. Wilson knocked once. No answer. He knocked again, harder. A soft voice from behind the door. "Come in, detective." Wilson entered slowly. The apartment smelled faintly of tobacco and lemon oil. Jazz played softly on vinyl in the background. John sat in a worn armchair, a record sleeve in his lap. He didn't look surprised. "Thought you'd find me sooner," John said. Wilson stayed near the door, every nerve on edge. "You left the necklace on purpose. You wanted me to find the room." John nodded. "Not for you, for her, Elena. She deserved more than a case number." "And Amanda, the others, what were they?" John looked up slowly, eyes heavy with sorrow. "Echoes. Lost notes in a song I couldn't finish. I didn't kill them, detective, but I couldn't save them either." "Then who did?" John gestured towards the bookshelf. Wilson stepped forward and found a thin black notebook tucked between old piano scores. Inside were sketches, names, maps, and at the center, a photo of the man in the gray hoodie. "He's the one. I've been following him for months, always a step behind. He used my cab that night. I knew it the second I smelled the cologne." Wilson's voice was low, edged with disbelief. "So why didn't you come forward?" "Because I was building a case, and because part of me thought, if I could stop him, maybe it would bring her back." Silence hung between them. "You have to let me help now," Wilson said finally. "We bring him in the right way." John nodded. "Then listen to track 4 on the tape I left you. It's his voice. I recorded him the night Amanda died." He confessed. Wilson stepped back, breath catching. The case had just turned. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, swallowed by fog. This time, they would bring the killer into the light. The next morning, Wilson played the 4th track. Static at first, then a low voice, distorted but unmistakable. She screamed. "I didn't mean to hurt her, but she recognized me. I had to shut her up." Wilson closed his eyes. This was it, a confession. They traced the voice. The audio engineer at NYPD confirmed a background hum matching the ventilation system of a maintenance tunnel under the East River, one recently shut down for repairs. Surveillance showed the hoodie man entering the tunnel 3 nights ago, duffel bag slung over his shoulder. John and Wilson drove together for the first time. John at the wheel, Wilson in the passenger seat, armed and alert. The fog was thicker than ever as they descended into the tunnel's entrance, concealed by a rusted gate. Inside, damp walls echoed every step. Graffiti, empty beer cans, and then footsteps. Wilson raised his gun. "Freeze, NYPD!" The man in the hoodie bolted. John sprinted after him faster than Wilson expected. They weaved through shadows until John tackled him near a broken vent shaft. The man struggled, but Wilson arrived seconds later, cuffs ready. "You followed me," the man hissed. You think this stops anything? You have no idea what's coming." Wilson stared into his eyes, calm, calculating, devoid of remorse. John stood over him, chest heaving. "It's over," Wilson nodded. "For now." They emerged from the tunnel as the first light of dawn broke through the mist. But something about the killer's final words clung to Wilson's mind. "You have no idea what's coming." Back at the precinct, Wilson replayed the killer's words over and over. "You have no idea what's coming." It wasn't just bravado. There was something practiced in his tone. Like someone delivering a script, he ordered a sweep of the maintenance tunnel, hoping for clues. What they found chilled him further. Behind a false wall near the shaft where the man had been tackled, the forensics team uncovered a small room, cleaner than the rest. It had power, a cot, a shelf of canned goods, and a wall plastered with photographs and notes. Victims, timelines, symbols. One symbol in particular appeared repeatedly, a crude sigil resembling a looping G inside a triangle. Wilson had seen it before, in an old case file labeled cold storage, not pursued. He retrieved the file from NYPD archives. The case dated back 7 years. A string of disappearances along the Hudson. All women, all unsolved. The same symbol had been drawn in chalk near 2 of the dump sites. It had been dismissed at the time as gang graffiti. This wasn't the work of one man, it was bigger. John, reviewing the evidence with Wilson, leaned back in his chair, eyes scanning the crime scene photos. These aren't trophies, they're documentation, cataloging. Someone's studying their patterns. Wilson nodded slowly. A network, a group maybe. And our guy in the hoodie? Just a foot soldier. John whispered, like a conductor playing someone else's score. They stared at the wall of images. Amanda, Elena, others still unnamed. Wilson felt the weight settle deeper in his chest. The killer's final words weren't just a warning. They were a promise. The looping G inside a triangle had a name. The Glyph of Galen. As Wilson dug deeper, he found mentions of it in obscure online forums and digitized occult manuscripts. The symbol belonged to a secretive organization known as the Chorus of Galen, a cult that believed in cleansing urban chaos through ritualistic sacrifice. They didn't see themselves as murderers. They saw themselves as composers, conducting what they called the harmonic purge. Every victim was chosen, not at random, but based on patterns of influence. Journalists, activists, artists, people who shaped narratives. To the chorus, these individuals disrupted the natural order with noise. Their deaths were meant to restore balance. The deeper Wilson looked, the stranger it got. Decades-old cold cases across New York, Chicago, Berlin, all marked by the same symbol. The chorus had chapters, a cell structure, initiation rites, and a code of silence enforced by extreme loyalty, blackmail, or fear. One name kept surfacing in whispers. Maestra, a woman who had allegedly led the New York cell since the early 2000s. Descriptions varied, but one trait remained constant. She always wore gloves. Never left prints. John hunched over Wilson's laptop, traced a name from the old case file. I remember her. Music critic for the Times. Disappeared in 2003. Everyone said she just moved to Paris. Wilson looked at the screen. The photo was grainy, but the eyes matched the witness sketches they had compiled. We find her, we find the center of this thing. But Maestra wasn't hiding. The next morning, a plain envelope was delivered to Wilson's desk. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of thick, cream-colored paper. In handwritten ink, "You've heard our melody, detective. Now learn to read the score." Below it, the sigil. And a list of 10 names. 2 were already dead. 3 were missing. And John's was number 7. The revelation shook John. Seeing his name on the list brought the weight of the case crashing down on him. He paced Wilson's office in silence, while Wilson reread the letter for the third time. "We don't have much time," John said finally. "If they're working through this list, I could be next." Wilson nodded, pulling a pinboard from the wall. He began organizing the names. Dead, missing, living. Patterns emerged. Locations, professions, media appearances. They're targeting voices, anyone with reach. You were the voice of the Elena Vigil, John. Your cab's confession tape brought this case national. You've been amplifying noise. John gave a bitter smile. All I ever wanted was to be heard. I didn't think that would put a target on my back. Wilson turned. That's exactly why we can use you. John froze. You want to use me as bait. They already know who you are. The envelope proves they're watching us. But if we set the stage right, we can draw them out. On our terms. Wilson contacted a trusted FBI liaison. Together, they proposed an undercover sting. John would give a televised interview about his role in the investigation, scheduled live with heavy security. The team would monitor the feed and trace any interference or surveillance tech targeting the station. But John had a better idea. "I'll go back to the tunnel," he said. "Not alone, but publicly. A press crew. A tribute to the victims. They think they own the underground. Let's see if they try to silence a camera." It was risky. Reckless even. But Wilson saw the spark in John's eyes. The same one that got Elena justice, that uncovered Amanda's killer. They agreed. The plan was set in motion. What neither of them knew was that Maestra was already watching. From a brownstone across the street, she observed through vintage opera glasses, gloved hands steady. She whispered to no one in particular. Let him speak. Every note has its place in the symphony. The game had begun. The day of the operation arrived under a sky of bruised clouds and restless wind. The city's air felt charged, like something waiting to snap. News vans lined the edge of the East River maintenance tunnel, cordoned off under the guise of a documentary shoot commemorating the victims of the Harmony murders. John stood at the entrance, dressed in a dark peacoat, a microphone clipped discreetly to his collar. Cameramen and sound techs buzzed around, oblivious to the armed plainclothes agents watching from rooftops, vans, and shadowed alleyways. Wilson, coordinating with FBI Special Agent Talley, monitored every frequency from a surveillance van nearby. John's earpiece crackled. "We're live in 5. The camera rolled. John spoke solemnly, voice strong. "Tonight, we return to where silence tried to bury truth, but truth, like sound, resonates." The broadcast cut through the fog of urban indifference. Viewers across the city tuned in, and so did the chorus. At 7:14 p.m., the perimeter alarms triggered. A figure was spotted moving through a storm drain outlet 2 blocks south. Wilson signaled the interception team, but something was off. Too obvious, too early. "Decoy," Talley said. "Keep eyes on the primary." Then a second signal hit. A frequency burst, piggybacking on the news feed. Hidden in the static was a digital signature, something the FBI cyber team identified as a coded ping, sent from a repeater near the waterfront. It was how the chorus tracked real-time responses. Wilson turned to John. "They're coming." Minutes later, a blackout swept the block. Generators kicked in, but half the feeds went dead. Through the darkness, shadowy figures emerged. 4 of them, gliding soundlessly, in long coats and black gloves. They didn't run. They walked with purpose toward John. Wilson and the strike team converged. Flashbangs lit the dusk. Commands shouted. Gunshots cracked through the tunnel mouth. When the chaos cleared, 2 suspects were down, 1 wounded, and 1 gone. Maestra had vanished, but the agents recovered something from one of the bodies. A gold tuning fork engraved with the glyph of Galen. Inside the fork's hollow shaft was a microchip. Back at headquarters, analysts decrypted it. coordinates, names, a concert schedule. John whispered, "She's planning something public." Wilson stared at the screen. The final event listed was 1 week away, in a cathedral known for its acoustics. It was titled simply, "The Last Movement." Maestra was no ordinary cult leader. She was a maestro of manipulation and control, orchestrating not just murders, but an entire symphony of chaos designed to reshape society itself. The last movement was to be the crescendo of the chorus of Guyland's mission, a public ritual disguised as a concert in the Grand Cathedral, chosen for its near-perfect acoustics. The cult believed sound could be a form of sacred power, able to influence minds and spirits. The concert would feature a carefully composed piece that integrated subliminal frequencies, intended to induce hysteria, confusion, and submission in the audience. Maestra's goal was not just to kill, but to awaken a collective consciousness among her followers while crushing dissenters psychologically. Her plan involved recruitment through art and influence. Members were often recruited from the very artists, journalists, and activists they targeted, turning victims into disciples through trauma and revelation. A network of control. The chorus had infiltrated key positions in media, law enforcement, and city administration to cover their tracks and manipulate public perception. The harmonic purge. The killings were notes in a larger composition, each death designed to silence specific voices that disrupted the cult's vision of harmony. The final performance. The cathedral event would be broadcast live worldwide. As the music played, Maestra planned to use advanced technology to emit frequencies that could incapacitate or control listeners, sowing chaos and fear on a global scale. John and Wilson's discovery of the microchip was the first concrete evidence the cult was moving beyond isolated murders toward mass psychological warfare. Back at NYPD headquarters, the mood was grim but focused. Wilson and John sat across from Special Agent Tally and a team of tech experts. Maps and blueprints of the cathedral spread across the table like a battlefield plan. "Time is tight," Tally said, tapping a finger on the schedule. "The concert is in 6 days. We have to move fast." Wilson nodded. "We need eyes inside. An undercover operative who can get close to the event's production team. Someone who understands sound engineering and can identify the tech they'll use." John looked down, voice steady but fierce. "I can do it. I know enough about audio equipment from my days, tinkering with my cab's radio. I've got to get close, maybe even act as a tech assistant or roadie." Wilson glanced at the others. "It's risky, but if anyone can walk that line, it's John." They laid out a plan. Infiltration. John would use an alias and forged credentials to infiltrate the production crew. His role: assist with sound equipment setup and monitor for suspicious devices. Tech countermeasures. The FBI's cyber unit would develop jammers and frequency blockers to neutralize the subliminal signals during the concert. Extraction team. Wilson would lead a tactical team stationed around the cathedral's perimeter, ready to intervene at a moment's notice. Public alert. The news media would be subtly primed to cover any disturbance, minimizing public panic. John packed light but mentally rehearsed every step. The line between acting and becoming the hunted was razor thin. That night, alone in his small apartment, John stared at a photo of Elena taped above his desk. The reason he never gave up. He whispered, "This ends with me." Wilson called before dawn. "Ready?" John took a deep breath. "Let's bring the curtain down." The Grand Cathedral stood bathed in haunting shadows, its soaring arches and stained glass windows casting kaleidoscopic patterns across the polished floor. A restless crowd gathered inside, unaware that their ears were about to be weaponized. John, disguised in the shadows backstage, moved carefully among the humming cables and glowing control panels. His heartbeat synced with the faint pulse of the ominous music warming up. the opening notes of Maestra's symphony. Through his earpiece, Wilson's voice was a whisper, steady but tense. "Stay sharp. We've got snipers on the roof and teams at every exit." The conductor's baton rose, and the orchestra's first chord shattered the silence. A dark, resonant note that seemed to vibrate in the bones of every listener. The music swelled, layering in subtle frequencies just beneath human perception. Suddenly, a ripple of unease passed through the crowd. Eyes fluttered, some faces twisted in confusion. Others gripped their heads in pain. John's eyes darted to the soundboard. Hidden beneath the layers of analog equipment was a digital device pulsing with the cult's sigil. His fingers flew, working frantically to disable it. Behind him, footsteps approached. Maestra appeared, gloved hands folded elegantly. Her voice was a soft command. "You don't belong here." John's heart pounded, but he steadied himself. "I'm here to stop this madness." She smiled coldly. "Madness? No, detective. This is harmony. The world needs a new order, and you're part of the old noise." Outside, Wilson's team burst through the cathedral doors just as the device sparked. The concert hall trembled with an eerie hum. A firefight erupted, echoes bouncing off marble and glass. Maestra slipped through the chaos, vanishing into the catacombs below. John looked to Wilson, breath ragged. "She's not done." Wilson nodded grimly. "Then neither are we." The final movement had begun. The morning after the cathedral raid, New York City woke to silence. Not the peace of resolution, but a hush of confusion, unease, and questions still unanswered. News broke rapidly. A botched concert, an underground cult, reports of mass hysteria during a live performance, though no official statement linked the chaos to the chorus of Guyland. Conspiracy forums and independent journalists exploded with leaked footage and whispered truths. Wilson sat in his office, eyes red, rewatching the concert footage. The subliminal frequency had been real. The FBI's jammers blunted its impact, but dozens of attendees still reported migraines, hallucinations, and emotional disorientation. Had they been just seconds away from something much worse? John hadn't slept. He stared at the cracked screen of his phone, watching a grainy clip of Maestra disappearing into the cathedral's underground passages. She had slipped through again. He knew she was still playing, somewhere. The microchip found in the tuning fork yielded more than just the concert plans. It revealed financial records, travel manifests, and names. Some hidden in codes, others disturbingly recognizable. Politicians, media executives, conductors. The chorus wasn't gone. It had just lost one movement. The cathedral stood sealed by federal order, its doors chained under FBI directive. But rumors spread quickly. Someone claimed to hear music late at night. Someone else found a gloved handprint on the choir loft door. Wilson, at his desk, picked up the next file. The next name. John tightened his coat and walked toward the cathedral's steps, alone. There were more movements to come, and Maestra's symphony wasn't finished.